So, hi everybody, and welcome to this talk called Don't Ask Why in Code Review. My name is Minna, and I am a software developer, or at least have been at certain points in my career. And I have given this talk before at Set State Meetup in London. Anybody remember Set State? Back in the old days. And I've also given it in JS Roundabout, also in London. And I'm giving it for the third time now. I work at Futurice, and as Juhis was mentioning earlier, we're always hiring. So please have a look at our career page. So this talk is going to be all about code review. We're going to start off with establishing a joint common understanding. What do we mean when we say code review? Then I'm going to dive into the topic of the talk, which is don't ask why. Why should you not ask why? You might be thinking, what is this? Bad advice, but it'll become clear. Then finally, I'll go on to give 7 more pieces of advice on how you can improve your code reviews starting immediately. So, what is code review? Code review is a process. Many of you are familiar with this process. It's a process that most software teams these days in the modern world take. First of all, you write code, then you push your changes onto a remote code repository like GitHub or GitLab. Your code is reviewed by your teammates, by your colleagues, and they may request some changes. Then you go off to write code again. You might modify, delete, or add new code. And then it goes through this loop until finally it exits the loop when your code is merged to the main branch. Now, what is the point of code review? The point of code review is to make code better. It starts off from being okay, and then it becomes double okay in the end. So it's all about making the code better. And what this means is that code review is part of the umbrella of quality assurance, or QA. We often associate the term QA with testing, but it is a big topic in which code review plays a part in making things better, improving the quality. Now, when we are thinking of code review as a process within quality assurance, really the question that we're trying to answer is the code good? But as somebody who writes code and then asks other people to look at the code, of course, I'll be thinking like, is my code good? I'll be a bit nervous. And then when I'm pushing my code out for other people to review, I'll be like really worried, am I a good coder? And we all know that code doesn't have feelings, but humans have feelings. This is not a human, this is a dog. But in any case, it's a sad dog. And humans have feelings. And when we do code review, we're essentially giving feedback to each other with the purpose of making code better. But as an author of code, being evaluated like this can be really stressful. And what I'm going to try and explain is why the word why adds a level of stress to this. Let's do this via example. 2 programmers, Football and Balloon. Now, Balloon has written some code, 12 minutes ago, in fact. And then Football has kindly reviewed the code and says, why multi-line comment syntax here and not the same as 4 lines before? Now, Football is probably thinking that they're like, why multiple line comment syntax here? But Balloon, on the other hand, is receiving this as plain text without any of the tonality. So Balloon might be interpreting this as, why multi-line comment syntax here, you idiot? And this is why this term is problematic. It's because when we write text in PRs, you lose the tone. But there's more to this word. So this whole talk was inspired by this book about negotiation called Never Split the Difference. And it's about negotiation situations, hostage negotiation and salary negotiation and all this sort of stuff. But Chris Voss here says, regardless of what language Y is translated into, it's accusatory. It's actually very difficult to use the word Y in a kind of neutral way. And you might get different kind of interpretations of what it means. What's the tone? But luckily, giving up on the word Y isn't about giving up on quality in code review. Y can be a very useful word in certain contexts. For example, with the 5 Whys technique, when you're trying to look at an issue that occurred, maybe a production issue, you might ask why, and then when you get the answer, you go a deeper level, oh, why did that happen, and then so forth until you find the solution, or rather the root cause. Why can be useful when you're trying to understand, as a consultancy, like why your clients want certain things. It helps in us building better products together. We even have these stickers at Futurice, ask why, and we like throw them out. Like everybody just ask why. But it's all about the context in which you're doing this. So there's this framework called the Radical Candor Framework, explained in Kim Scott's excellent book. And it has these 2 axes: care personally on the Y and challenge directly on the X. And this is about communication. It's a communication framework. So code review, remember, is about getting to better quality. So we have to have that challenge directly aspect. We have to be here. But then care personally, ideally, if we want our feedback to land properly, we also have to do that. So the only thing that we're trying to avoid by avoiding the word why is actually falling into this obnoxious aggression where we are appropriately challenging directly, but forgetting to care personally. So you want to do both. And luckily, there are other words that you can use than why when you're doing code review. You can say, perhaps this could be changed to. It looks like this is. Can this be made more like? Or I'm not sure I understand yet. Can you clarify? And when we make sure that we use nice words when we communicate and give feedback to our colleagues, then we're avoiding having negative feelings about this learning loop, because it's all about getting to better code at the end. And when we're more receptive to going into that code review situation, putting our code out there, getting feedback, then we start learning more and we start producing better code in the first place. And then it gets even better. It gets quadruple okay in the end when we feel good about this process. So I would state that the secret to good quality software is good code review culture. And this leads to the very first piece of advice, which is don't ask why. And I will continue to give 7 more pieces of advice, but much more quickly. So, tip number 2. When you're doing code review, format your comment as an observation. Let's look at this through an example. Football and balloon, again in the same situation, but this time in an alternate universe, football has seen this talk and decided to alter their approach. Football says, it looks like there's an inconsistency in the comment syntax. This is multi-line and 4 lines before it's single line. This allows balloon to say, oh yeah, you're right, I'll change it. It takes the human out of the equation instead of, why did you do this? You idiot. It's, oh, it looks like the code is like that. It allows the other person to say, I agree with you. I can see that too. We are in agreement. So it takes the human out of the equation and it makes you feel better. It makes the receiver feel better about it. Tip number 3, use emojis. Emojis have a surprising effect on people. It's like they use an emoji, they're not angry. Because really think of some like very blatant sort of flat comment without any lift to it. You don't know how to interpret that, but an emoji always means it's slightly lifted. So, for example, my favorite is when there's a typo. Usually this happens in comments. You're like, do I even really want to say anything? But you can with an emoji. Just say, typo over here, articulated Lori. And it's like, who cares? It's all good. Tip number 4, suggest alternatives. So this is a good one. Basically, when you are giving code review, make sure that you are being quite specific on what you're saying. If you have a comment, but you don't really know what an alternative could be, then maybe think of how could you format this in such a way that you're providing an alternative to the code. Example, telephone says, the code could be more concise if we omit the declaration of the spinner value variable, and then, very helpfully, here's how to do it in one line. This is great because we're basically using our common shared understood language of, the software language that we're using here, JavaScript, basically to communicate with each other. So just add the code to your reviews, the thing that you're suggesting. It's great. Everybody loves it. And you're not imposing on your colleague by writing code for them. It's friendly to write code to your colleagues. So then tip number 5, find something nice to say. I have received feedback at some point that finding something nice to say and saying something nice isn't what code review is about. As we discussed, code review is about making the code better. But there are kind of good ways to do finding something nice to say, and there's bad ways to do finding something nice to say, but I recommend doing it the good way. So the bad way to do it is to use a shit sandwich, which is where you say something nice, and then you kind of go and say, well, why did you do that? And didn't I tell you not to do that before? And why are you so-and-so? And then you round it up with something like, seems to compile, so. But the whole point is like, basically, you can do better. And how can you do better? By using the radical candor framework and remembering to challenge directly and to care personally. So basically, saying something nice is not about challenging directly because it's on the totally different axis to what that relates to. Saying something nice is on the care personally axis. We're not trying to avoid challenging by being nice. Instead, we're just being empathetic by caring personally. So you don't need to go there, but all you want to do by saying something nice is to avoid the obnoxious aggression region. And how do you do that? It's by being specific about what you're saying nice things about and meaning what you say. It's about sincerity and specificity. This is how you say nice things in code review. Let's take an example. Pancakes has given a code review and says, I like how you've written this auto-collapsing functionality. It's rather elegant, referring to these lines of code. Specific as it refers to these lines of code, and sincere. Then we're going to go into advanced code review topics. When you've done code review enough, you get into the stage where maybe you have pull requests that you're trying to review, but the other person just doesn't agree with me. Should I keep arguing with them in the pull request comments? And it depends. The answer to should I keep arguing is maybe. Now, good reasons to keep arguing, of course, are that there are errors in the code. The whole point is we're trying to remove errors. Obviously, you don't want anything that will pull down production to go to production. And if the code does not comply with the agreed standards, in which case you can give an actionable suggestion to make the code comply with the agreed standards. And these are very good reasons to keep arguing your point. On the other hand, sometimes it's hard. It can be hard when it's about code style, but this can be solved too. For example, you can have common standards. And even better, you can use something like Prettier, which is an auto-formatter for your JavaScript and TypeScript, which basically reduces an entire level of code review problems that you might have with your colleagues. Another time when it gets kind of tricky is when you have concerns, but no actionable suggestions. Now, this can happen really easily when you have very large PRs. Like, imagine when you're receiving a pull request that you're about to review and it's 3,000 lines of code changed. You kind of look at it and you're like, something's a bit fishy about this, but I don't really know what. And then you have no actionable suggestions. So the kind of recommendation, of course, is to make the PR smaller throughout your team. But it's really hard when, like, if you don't have anything actionable to suggest. And then another time when it's difficult, like whether you should keep arguing or not, is when it's about the future. Here's an example. So Balloon and Football are arguing, and Balloon says, "Is it future-proof? Can this code be reused?" And Football says, "We may not even build those features in the future. Let's not waste time by future-proofing code when we don't know what the future holds." Very common source of argument. But the truth is really that software development is all about trade-offs. Like here in this situation, Balloon is just thinking about the code quality, about reducing risk, but Football is thinking about speed, perhaps. It's all about trade-offs. And how do you resolve trade-offs when maybe there isn't a perfect solution? Well, take it out of the code review comments in the GitHub or whatever. Go to their desk, or if it's a remote team, then do an ad hoc call. Talk it out. You can do this. You're all smart people. Basically, sometimes if you just keep having a thread of code review where the argument goes on and on, usually talking to the person directly will resolve it a lot faster. And when we have speed, we resolve business problems more quickly and we make money. So, tip number 7, sometimes this doesn't work. Sometimes you cannot resolve the argument. And in these cases, I recommend to defer to a third person. Here's an example from real life. Pancakes is reviewing Telephone's code. Pancake says, this line gets highlighted as unreachable in my IDE. Uses lots of good tactics. Neutral emoji, observation. Telephone says, I don't agree. Pancakes tries again. Tries with we, not you. Tries not to accuse. And then even tries to escalate to Telephone's desk. And then writes about what happened at the desk. And yet, apparently still, they can't really reach a conclusion. Then Telephone comes in. Football comes in. And it doesn't need to be a tech lead or anything. It can just be a third person, anybody, who gives an opinion. And then you suddenly have 3 who can form a consensus, rather than 2 people can't actually, because it's 50-50, but if there are 3, then it's 66-33. So, defer to a third person is a good piece of advice. And this is described in The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni, and it's called Disagree and Commit. So, not everything needs to be perfect. Not everybody has to agree all the time. And about not agreeing, tip number 8, sometimes it's fine to just let it go. Because maybe it's okay that bad code enters main occasionally, because you have tests, right? No, but the point is that code review is only part of quality assurance. So even if bad code gets through code review, if it's truly bad, it might get caught by quality assurance, or it might get caught by the future. Maybe somebody will change it in the future in a different pull request. So this is really the concluding thought here, which is simply remember that code review is only a small part of the process. Thanks. That's all. Any questions or comments? This is probably a topic that touches many hearts, so feel free to just tell your stories if you like.
Hi. Do you have thoughts about or are you familiar with the conventional comments specification? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
Have you heard of conventional commits? Never mind. If you Google for conventional comments, you'll find actually the only specification I've ever heard of for the sorts of comments that you might leave on a pull request or something. Effectively, it's a matter of prefixing your comment, starting your comment with like a keyword. What sort of a thing is this? Then a title and then some comments. In my experience, in a couple of places where I've had this, where I've been a part of a project using this, it's been interesting and useful, and it helps in giving some of the context of whether you're really, whether this comment is a thing that, I might be phrasing it as a why, but really you better answer correctly. Or if it's an honest question because I'm not sure and, I'm interested to have a discussion about it.
I love how this is entirely related to the standardize all things, but certainly, yes, this sounds like a great idea, and I have to look this up for future versions of this talk.
Conventional comments should be relatively easy to find.
And another kind of related item is that there's this concept of like the 3 forms of feedback, which are evaluation, coaching, and appreciation. So it's like we talked about how evaluation is stressful, but sometimes feedback can actually be about coaching. And maybe it's good to explicitly state what you're trying to intend with your messages like this.
Any other questions?
I think this is more like a comment, but still. So I feel like for me, a big part of a good code review is that the comments that the reviewer gives me have a clear indication whether they are just thoughts that popped into their head or something that really needs to be changed. And that is particularly the case with reviews that end up with changes requested. So if it's like 20 comments with no indication of which ones are the actual thing that they want changed, it's kind of nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I remember when I actually received some feedback on code reviews I was giving that like, Minna, stop blocking my code reviews with your stupid comments. Just let me push my code, please. And I was like, maybe I just make less comments. And it really made me focus on the important things. So.
Just one thing, is this talk available somewhere? I would love to share it with my...
Yeah. Just if you...
I didn't have to even finish that sentence.
If you Google my name and then the name of the talk, I think you'll be able to find it. Except I used to have a different name because I got married. So you might... Minna Niemi was the previous name.
But it's also available as a live stream right now, so you can find it on YouTube under this event as well.
Okay, so let's give a big hand to Minna.